Do you see Doug Ford as a problem for the federal party in the outcome of this race?
I see Doug Ford as a problem for Ontario and for Canada.
Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, don't you dare go out and help the PCs.
Well, isn't this fun? It appears there is a storm brewing between conservatives within Canada, a conservative civil war, if you will. So in this video, I'm going to break down all the controversy. So this really has to do with Doug Ford, Ontario Premier and leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, which for my American friends is a conservative party. I know the name is confusing. And Jamil Jivani, who used to work with Doug Ford and is now a federal conservative MP. So I'm going to get to what he said on election night and the storm that it lit, that Doug Ford has now responded to twice in very different ways. First, let me show you Jamil Jivani's riding, which he just won this week, unlike the leader of his party. So Bowmanville, Oshawa North is Jamil Jivani's riding. A close race here, but he did clearly win by a few thousand points. Now, this borders right along the ridings that the Liberals won, and essentially the big reason why they were able to win a minority government in the election. But let me first start with Jamil Jivani's comments on election night. I'm going to break this up into two different pieces because I got some thoughts after the first clip here.
Doug Ford just went through an election. I have differences of opinion with him. I don't like how he's managed healthcare or education, but out of respect, we didn't say anything. Federal party, we didn't get in his way. When it was our turn to run an election, he couldn't stay out of our business, always getting his criticisms and all his opinions out, distracting our campaign, trying to make it about him, trying to position himself as some kind of political genius that we needed to be taking cues from.
Well, this is just fantastic. So there's more to come as well as Ford's response, but I wanted to pause here because there's a few things worth noting. First off, regardless how you feel about Jamil Jivani, it is refreshing to hear a politician not be afraid to speak their mind. Also worth mentioning, I don't know what Doug Ford he's talking about because there was one comment Doug Ford made about Pierre Poilievre's campaign, and that was it. There wasn't this constant sniping and criticizing of the campaign. The comment was essentially, Pierre Poilievre would have done better if he had my campaign manager, which was only said because Ford's campaign manager, Corey Tenike, I did a video on his comments, criticized Pierre Poilievre's campaign for losing a 25-point lead, which I think it's important if you drop a lead like that to maybe hear criticisms, even if you don't agree with them. I don't think you should be critical of criticisms from your own side for losing a lead like that. That said, the real issue I take with the comments here are the fact that Jamil Jivani has an issue with how Doug Ford runs education and healthcare. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, you know what? Maybe me and Jamil Jivani have a lot more in common than I realized. And then I looked into it and not quite. So is Jamil Jivani critical of Doug Ford because of his cuts to healthcare? The fact that Ontario spends the least per capita out of any other province on healthcare? Is it the fact that there's a lack of family doctors? Is it the fact that there are private clinics that are charging more than triple what public facilities charge for OHIP-covered procedures? As far as I know, those aren't the criticisms. The criticism is the fact that Jamil Jivani leans on the anti-vax side of the spectrum. So he had a radio show with Bell. He ended up getting fired. He then sued Bell for being discriminatory. And then Bell came back saying that he was fired for promoting an anti-vaccine message, saying that Bell had serious concerns that Jivani invited guests to his show who espoused anti-vax views and spread false information about the necessity and efficacy of vaccines and alternative therapies such as hydroxychloroquine. The plaintiff allowed these guests to espouse such views without challenging such views or offering a balanced counterpoint. There are so many legitimate reasons to criticize Doug Ford on healthcare. His approach to vaccines is not one of them, but he found a way to criticize Doug Ford on healthcare on something that he does not deserve criticism on. Also, On education, no, of course, Jamil Javani is not concerned that Doug Ford is underfunding K-12 education by $1,500 per student. Again, as far as I've read, maybe he has criticized Ford for this, for not being progressive enough in education. I tend to think as a conservative MP that this is not the problem that Jamil Javani has with Doug Ford, or the fact that Doug Ford froze funding for higher education, or the fact that Ford has made numerous attempts to cut the number of teachers. Again, these are criticisms from a working class, more left-wing progressive position. So I don't think Jamil Javani holds these criticisms, but he has criticized the government, the Ford government, for their policies on COVID-19, especially related to prolonged school closures. So this appears to be the issue that Jamil Javani has with Doug Ford. All right, let me get to the rest of that clip.
Was it him specifically? Was it his campaign manager, Corey, tonight? Do you see Doug Ford as a problem for the federal party in the outcome of this race?
I see Doug Ford as a problem for Ontario and for Canada. I think he's not doing a great job in running this province, and now he's trying to exercise his influence over other levels of government, and it's not like this guy is doing anything particularly well. I mean,
You did used to work for him.
I did. I'm speaking from experience. I tried to fix problems in this province, and he kept getting in his way and all his goons around him all the time. They wouldn't make anything better, and now we're seeing him because this guy's a political genius because he beat Bonnie Crombie and Stephen Del Duca, and now we got to sit around getting advice from him? No. He has taken the provincial Conservative Party and turned it into something hollow, unprincipled, something that doesn't solve problems. He's glad-handing with Chrystia Freeland, having coffees and lattes with Mark Carney, and I'm sitting here saying we need to be fighting for change and something new and something different, not being a hype man to the Liberal Party. All sorts of people who've been part of our movement for a long time united behind Pierre. They're opportunists like Doug Ford. And I think it's not about ideology or differences of beliefs. It is about some people believing our purpose as Conservatives is to be an alternative to what the Liberals offer. And then there are people like Doug Ford who are opportunists. And I reject that outright.
Look, I may not completely agree with everything he's saying here, but he is spitting that this guy's a political genius because he beat Bonnie Crombie and Stephen Del Duca. That's a line for the ages. Funny stuff here from Jamil Javani. This is not my fight to have. This is between the Conservatives. They can enjoy their little civil war here. And apparently they are enjoying it. So this was a live recording of the reaction in the room of a Conservative crowd as Jamil Javani's making these comments. So Richard Southern captured this.
I'm turning into something hollow, unprincipled, something that doesn't solve problems. He's glad-handing with Chrystia Freeland, having coffees and lattes with Mark Carney, and I'm sitting here saying we need to be fighting for change and something new and something different, not being a hype man to the Liberal Party. Some would argue that the challenge within the federal Conservative movement.
Now, it's worth, they love it, obviously. It's worth noting the job as a premier is to look out for their province. So, as Ontario premier, of course, Doug Ford is going to be working with the federal government. It's he's meeting with Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, because he's the premier of Ontario. It's just, okay. I wouldn't call him a hype man for Mark Carney. He met with Mark Carney because he's the Prime Minister. Whatever. Again, I should just sit back and enjoy it. I shouldn't be critical of what's being said here because it has no impact on me right now. Let's get to Doug Ford. So there are two comments. This is the day after. It's a different tone than the next clip is going to strike, but here is Doug Ford's initial reaction.
Last night, an MP in Durham region that you know quite well said that you were a hype man for the Liberals and that you sabotaged the campaign for the Conservatives.
Well, I'm focusing on unity right across this country. We have to bring this country together like we've never have before. Each other are not the enemies. There's one person that's causing a real problem, not just here around the world, and that's President Trump.
Well, there you go. Doug Ford taking the high road, not going to get into the mud, except for the next day where he said this.
He was asked about why he didn't appear with Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre during the course of the federal election campaign. Let's listen.
Interfere in the federal election. Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, "Don't you dare go out and help the PCs." Isn't that ironic? But anyways, I'm not going to dig deep into this. The people spoke, and I have no say in who people vote for. But I'll tell you one thing. We have a government, democratically elected. I will hold them accountable. I'll hold them accountable like I would no matter if it's a conservative government or a liberal government. My interest is protecting the people of Ontario. And I will be all over this government. They know I will be, as I was before, about being tough on crime.
Premier, you've said before you're born with a C stamped on your forehead. You talked about having a blue sign on your lawn.
Yep.
Why is there so much bad blood between you and the federal party? And how does the federal party start to build bridges now within the conservative movement as they look to the next 3, 4 years?
Well, all they have to do is make a phone call. I like a lot of the MPs, but the people spoke, and they spoke loud and clear. They spoke loud and clear in our election, and they spoke loud and clear on the federal election. And so that's democracy.
What's wild is that a lot of this animosity apparently comes down to the fact that Pierre Poilievre had essentially no contact with Doug Ford until March of this year, despite the fact that Pierre Poilievre has been the Conservative leader for 2 years and Doug Ford has been the Premier of Ontario since 2018. So there is some bad blood between the PCs, or at least Doug Ford, and the Pierre Conservatives. One last thing worth sharing here is that today, after that clip came out, here is Jamil Javani just continuing to light the fire, showing Doug Ford ripping off the Ontario PC shirt to uncover a Liberal shirt. Considering there were actually many criticisms from the NDP and the Liberals of Doug Ford in terms of actual policy and what Doug Ford has been doing to the province of Ontario, it's a little wild to try and align Doug Ford with the Liberals. Why? Because he's the Premier of Ontario and wants to work with the Prime Minister? Like, if anything, this is going to help Doug Ford. Because even someone like me who's very critical of Doug Ford, very incredibly critical of the actual policies and the lack of help that this province has, he's coming off as the guy on top here because he's being critical, very openly critical of Donald Trump, and has been able to, politically read the room on that properly, while at the same time being open to working with other parties that are in power, because as the Ontario Premier, his job is to help Ontario, which you could argue in many ways he definitely is not doing, but at the very least, he's meeting with other people, which I guess the Conservative Party has no interest in doing. I don't know. That's how it's coming off to me. But what are your thoughts on this brewing civil war within the Conservative movement? Let me know below in the comments.